talk about, it's funny because I did the daily vibes and the attachment card was in that shadow card position, so it feels like a good time to start on something I've been meaning to talk about for a while, which is healthy boundaries. And it's definitely something, I mean, if you're in any sort of twin flame journey, it's definitely there. And if you've been dealing with any fear of attachment, fear of rejection, fear of success, any of that stuff, a lot of it has to do with healthy boundaries. And boundaries boundaries are so important. The irony is we often hold better boundaries with strangers in ways we don't actually need to than we do with those that we love the most, who it's actually way more important to hold healthy boundaries with. Now, as I've discussed in many other videos, healthy boundaries are not rigid. They're not like a brick wall. They're not like this thing where you just have this incredible brick wall that nobody can climb over or pass through. And they're also not, they shouldn't be spongy. They shouldn't be porous. Like they shouldn't just be a bunch of sticks that anybody can walk in and out of any time. It should sort of be like the ropes around a wrestling ring or a boxing ring, right? They should be flexible. They should be able to keep, like, if you need to at some point in time, you should be able to snap and they turn into a brick wall if you need to, but that shouldn't last forever. And if you need, and otherwise sometimes they're just the ropes and you could say, come on in, and somebody can push them up and down and come on in. And healthy boundaries in that way are flowing. But I think where a lot of us get bound up, especially us eight types, is that we often aren't aware of where our boundaries are until they've been crossed. And I mean, it's not a great way to go about things, but it's also, you're not always going to know what your boundaries are or where your boundaries are until they're hit. Sometimes that's how things work, is you don't realize that, but you can usually tell when you're getting close to approaching a boundary because you're starting to feel triggered. Like you're having thoughts coming in about like, oh, I can't believe they're not responding to me fast enough, or oh, I can't believe they just did that. That was so thoughtless, or um, I don't like, it's like something you could tell you don't like something. And yes, when you're triggered, you should take that time to examine yourself and do the inner work. But in general, we all have boundaries that are innate. And most of them are pretty common, like don't talk disrespectfully to people. Don't say mean things. Don't make people wait forever to hear from you on a simple yes or no question. Don't leave all the work up to somebody else in terms of reaching out or planning things, especially family stuff. Don't leave other people holding the bag. Don't make everything about you emotionally. Like they're pretty simple ground rules for most healthy adult communication. Even kids, for that matter. Kids are usually way better at communicating in healthy ways, even before they're really all that verbal. Like they tell you where their limits are. And maybe that's a good thing too. An example as metaphor is we all have an inner child. And when that inner child starts to get really upset about something that's happening, you've either hit a boundary or you're about to hit a boundary. And I read something recently that really resonated with me, and I think it will help you if you're also working on this, is that healthy boundaries should not be when the boundaries are struck and you're like uber triggered and all that stuff. Like that's when we start getting into ultimatums and really big displays of emotions and things like that. Healthy boundaries should occur, like take 10 steps back from that trigger point towards yourself, and when you're just starting to notice that you have a boundary that's being crossed. And usually it's you crossing your own boundary, because boundaries are about, like say that you've been communicating with somebody that makes you wait like unreasonable amounts of time to answer you. Your boundary should be like when you feel that point to where you're like, okay, this is stopping me from being able to make plans, like with family, with kids, with other things, or this is really triggering me. This is starting to trigger me into feeling like I'm being disrespected. Like right when you first start getting that feeling, that's where your boundary should be. Before you're really mad, before you're really triggered. And, take down the emotionalness of it and just be clear. Like, you know what? Like think about your healthy interactions with healthy family and friends. Like if you ask them a question and they get an answer to you within a few hours, within a day, anything like that, if that's how healthy communication goes. So if you're asking a question to somebody and they're not responding back to you in a reasonable amount of time in comparison to those who you have healthy dynamics with, then your boundary should be with them where the maximum would be with anybody else that you don't have that dynamic with. Like, just take it back there. And as you start to take your boundaries back to those places, you're going to notice that either those unhealthy relationships fade away because those people cannot interact with healthy boundaries, and you're going to feel less stressed and less likely to need to interact with that, or they're going to get it together and they're going to realize, oh, you know what? Yeah, I have been being unreasonable, or you know what, I would hate to wait that amount of time. It's something. They're going to do something like that. Most people do the second. Most people have to go through, especially if you've had unhealthy boundaries with them, like you've let things go on far too long, you've been overgiving, overpatient, things like that. They just need a minute to get used to you being at a point of healthy boundaries. But remember that boundaries are about you. So just think about in the sense of like if you were in an icky place, you were in the other dimension, you were in jello mode, like how would you want somebody to display healthy boundaries to you? You don't need somebody to lecture you. You don't need somebody to explain why they're not waiting. You just need the clarity of where is that boundary. Okay, that boundary's at 6 hours. That boundary's at 8 hours. That boundary's at 24 hours. Okay, good to know, you know? And if you want to know more, you'll ask more. If you don't want to know more, you won't. In any case, I think that that's a good nugget for now. It's just simply recognizing where your boundaries should be. Like, there are going to be plenty of times when your boundaries get triggered and you're already well over the spin out point, the tantrum point, the reactivity point. It's good to observe that and then take 10 steps back from that towards yourself. And that's where you want to set the limit. Because then you're already, you're practicing good self-worth, you're practicing good self-respect, you're not putting yourself in waiting mode for somebody to get back to you. And this could be anybody. It could be somebody you work with that's maybe not good about doing projects on time. It could be a co-parent, it could be an ex, it could be a twin flame, it could be a spouse, anything. Like, set your boundaries at a healthy level, and then don't take it personally if they don't respond well, because that says a lot more about what's going on within them, the fight between them, than it does about you. And also, I mean, a lot of times, even if it's just a small interaction, like say with somebody that you were interviewing at a job for, you're actually going to be displaying to them what healthy boundaries look like. And when the time comes that they're ready to do that healing work and set healthy boundaries themselves, they're going to remember how simple it was when you did it. I think my 9-year-old really gives me the best example of it. Like, he has pretty healthy boundaries. If he feels like you're being good to him and kind, and it's not about like transactional. If you're being kind and respectful and good, you say sorry when you mess up, things like that, then he'll talk with you, he'll communicate with you. If you're not, well, no, we're not going to talk to you. And that's fine. Even if the other person suddenly starts being nice, but they haven't addressed stuff, he's good with that. And I love that. I'm glad that at least he has that. In any case, I'm going to leave this divine nugget here, and I hope that you enjoy it. If you have more questions about boundaries, I'd love to hear them, because I'd like to do some more videos on them. And sometimes they come out when asked a question or when I hear someone else talking about it, and that becomes the easy way to, I don't know, to get them out. Anyways, thanks for adding your vibes to the tribe, and I'll talk to you in the next video.